Have you ever wondered why a woman's silence can echo louder than her words, why her withdrawal, her calm, her gaze that no longer seeks, can leave a man disoriented, even haunted? There is a particular kind of quiet that does not beg to be understood, it demands it. It is not the quiet of defeat, but of awakening, and when it appears, something ancient stirs in both masculine and feminine souls, as though two archetypes suddenly remember they were never meant to control one another, only to reflect the light and shadow within each other. In Jungian psychology, silence is not an absence, it is a language of the unconscious. When a woman stops explaining, stops pleading, stops performing the emotional labor of connection, she has entered the alchemical stage of transformation. Her silence is a crucible, a sacred space where the self begins to separate from illusion, the illusions of needing to be chosen, of needing to be understood, of needing to be loved by someone who cannot yet love themselves. A man, on the other hand, often perceives this silence through the wounded prism of ego. He wonders what he has done wrong, or worse, assumes she is being cold. He does not see that her stillness is not punishment, it is initiation. Her retreat is the mirror of his own unfinished inner work, his unacknowledged anima, the feminine aspect of his psyche that he has long suppressed. In her silence, he confronts the echo of his own disconnection. You see, when a woman withdraws her energy, she calls back the projections that once defined her worth. For years, she may have been a mirror to someone else's insecurities, reflecting his strength, his power, his importance, while dimming her own flame to keep the peace. But silence is where she reclaims her fire. Jung would say she is individuating, returning from the collective illusion of dependency to the sacred solitude of self-realization. It is not an act of pride, but of necessity. And yet, her silence unsettles the man because it reveals that his validation was never the source of her value. The moment she no longer reacts, his power over her dissolves. The game of emotional dominance crumbles into dust, and he finds himself standing before the vast unknown, faced not with her silence, but with the emptiness within himself. It is often in this stillness that the masculine awakens, or falls apart. Jung referred to it as the confrontation with the shadow. Everything repressed, denied, or avoided surfaces when the external object of control disappears. A man who once measured his worth by a woman's attention begins to feel the absence of his own inner compass. Her silence becomes his mirror, showing him not who she is, but who he has refused to become. To the woman, this silence feels both terrifying and liberating. It is a death of identity, a shedding of roles, the nurturer, the pleaser, the forgiver. She begins to see how often her voice was used to maintain peace at the cost of authenticity. Her old patterns, explaining herself, fixing others, translating her pain into palatable words, start to dissolve. She does not wish harm upon the man, instead, she no longer needs to rescue him from his discomfort. This stage of silence is profoundly misunderstood. Society often paints it as detachment or indifference, but beneath it lies the raw pulse of rebirth. A woman in silence is in sacred dialogue with her unconscious, descending into her own underworld. Much like Inanna stripping herself of all garments of identity before facing her true self. She listens not to others, but to the faint whispers of intuition that were once drowned out by the noise of compromise. For the man, this transformation feels like a loss. He may accuse her of being distant, unfeeling, or cold. However, what he does not realize is that she is no longer a part of his emotional world. She has stepped out of the gravitational pull of his approval. In doing so, she invites him to meet her, not as a dependent, but as an equal. Yet few men can endure this confrontation. To face a woman who no longer needs him is to face the void of his own dependence on her validation. And so, confusion takes root. He may chase her attention again, not out of love, but to reaffirm his sense of importance. He may test her boundaries, hoping to provoke a reaction, to feel alive again in the dance of pursuit. But the woman who has entered silence no longer dances to that rhythm. Her steps now follow a deeper drumbeat, the sound of her own becoming. There is a paradox here. When she finally withdraws, she becomes more powerful, not because she dominates, but because she no longer participates in illusions of control. Jung wrote that, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that is precisely what her silence protects, the space in which she becomes. If you are listening now, perhaps you've felt this shift, within yourself or in someone you once held close. Maybe you've seen that strange moment when words no longer bridge the distance between two souls. When the woman you thought you knew suddenly becomes a mystery. Not because she hides, but because she is unveiling herself from within. The silence of a woman, in its most valid form, is the sound of her sovereignty. It is the vibration of the self reclaiming its axis. It disarms those who rely on her softness to feel strong, and it illuminates those who seek authenticity over approval. This silence is not rejection, it is realignment. It is the feminine withdrawing her energy from the external and turning it inward, toward the fertile soil of her own soul. Within that soil, new wisdom blooms. The understanding that love cannot thrive in the shadow of need. And that peace is not found in control but in release. Men who sense this shift often feel lost. But if they listen deeply, beneath the fear, beneath the noise, they might hear the call of their own anima awakening. The silence of a woman, when met with presence rather than pride, can become the mirror through which a man finally meets himself. But few recognize this sacred opportunity. Most resist it. They try to fill the space she creates with noise, distraction, or conquest. They do not see that the silence they fear is the very doorway to intimacy, the real kind, where two whole beings meet without masks. Because in truth, when a woman falls silent, she is not vanishing, she is returning to herself, to her inner kingdom, to the divine equilibrium that no external voice can shake. And when she emerges again, she does not seek validation, she radiates truth, and truth, unlike approval, cannot be taken away. In the echo of her silence, something begins to shift, both in her and in him. The energetic tides that once flowed outward now turn inward, and what once felt like loss becomes the slow birth of understanding. The woman, in her stillness, begins to sense the subtle architecture of her soul, the places she once abandoned to keep the peace, the fragments of self she offered up for affection, the boundaries she dissolved for the illusion of connection. Her silence is not emptiness, it is reclamation. It is the sacred pause between who she was and who she is becoming. Jung would say that this is the realm of individuation, the process of integrating the unconscious into the conscious, of becoming whole. A woman in silence is a woman walking between worlds, the visible and the invisible, the ego and the self. She no longer reacts to the world's projections, instead, she observes them. Every attempt to provoke a response from her becomes a reflection of what she has already transcended. She is not ignoring the masculine, she is redefining her relationship to it. This moment confuses men deeply. For the rhythm they once knew, the give and take of emotional exchange, no longer obeys familiar laws. The man, sensing her withdrawal, may feel a primal panic rise within him. He does not understand why her calmness feels so threatening. He cannot articulate why her serenity feels like rejection. But beneath his confusion lies a more profound truth. He has built his sense of identity upon her responsiveness. Her silence is not cruelty, it is an unveiling of dependency. In Jungian terms, he is meeting his shadow. The shadow is not evil, it is everything the conscious ego refuses to acknowledge. And for many men, that includes their vulnerability, their fear of irrelevance, their craving to be seen as powerful. The woman's silence pierces this illusion like a mirror that no longer flatters. He begins to see the hollow spaces in his own sense of self. He begins to feel the absence of the feminine energy he once consumed for comfort. Yet, within that discomfort lies a potential awakening. If he dares to look inward, he might discover that the silence is not against him, it is for him. It is an invitation to step out of projection and into authenticity. It asks him to find, within himself, the qualities he once sought in her: empathy, emotional intelligence, intuition, and depth. But for that transformation to occur, he must first endure the death of the ego's illusions. He must allow himself to be stripped of the belief that control equals connection. Meanwhile, the woman's silence deepens. It becomes a meditation, a spiritual retreat within the chaos of modern love. She begins to realize that much of what she called love was, in truth, attachment. It was a transaction of emotional reassurance, a constant reaching outward to feel worthy. In the absence of noise, she begins to hear the faint, steady hum of her true self. It does not plead, it does not justify, It simply exists, radiant and whole. Her silence is not a sign of submission, it is a symbol of sovereignty. It is the feminine reclaiming her spiritual authority from the distortions of need. She understands now that explaining herself to those unwilling to listen is an act of self-betrayal. Her energy, once scattered in endless attempts to be understood, now gathers within her like a storm of quiet power. Her calm is not weakness, it is mastery. For the man, this silence creates a paradox. The more he tries to understand it through logic, the less sense it makes. Because silence is not logical, it is symbolic. It speaks the language of the soul, not the intellect. It demands that he feel rather than fix, that he listen rather than talk, that he meet her presence without the armor of dominance. Many men fail this initiation. They interpret her detachment as a challenge to be conquered or a puzzle to be solved. They chase, they argue, they plead, hoping to restore the equilibrium that once favored them. But each attempt only widens the gap. For she no longer vibrates at the same frequency. Her silence is not a wall, it is a threshold. And only those willing to step into their own shadow may cross it. If he resists, he may project his insecurities onto her, accusing her of being cold, prideful, or manipulative. He does not see that these accusations are reflections of his own internal state, the chaos within him seeking an external villain. Jung warned that, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life." The silent woman becomes one such disguise, a mirror in which he sees not her withdrawal, but his own fear of being unseen. For the woman, this realization becomes liberating. She no longer carries the emotional responsibility for another's awakening. She sees now that love cannot be born from constant explanation. She understands that to hold silence is to have power, the kind that needs no validation, no performance, no apology. And yet, there is tenderness in this transformation. Her silence is not bitterness. It is compassion evolved into clarity. She wishes no harm to the man who cannot yet meet her. She refuses to shrink herself to make him comfortable. She has learned that saving another from their discomfort is not love, it is avoidance of truth. In the space her silence creates, something miraculous begins to grow: self-trust. For the first time, she listens to the voice within her, the one that always whispered beneath the noise of obligation. That voice tells her that peace is her birthright, that love without respect is a prison, that understanding herself is more sacred than being understood by others. And perhaps, somewhere within his confusion, the man begins to sense the lesson. Too, he may not yet have the words for it, but he feels the gravity of her silence pulling him inward, toward his own reflection. If he resists, he will remain trapped in cycles of control and loss. But if he surrenders, if he listens, he may find that her silence is not abandonment, but initiation into true intimacy. Because silence, at its deepest level, is communication between souls. It strips away the noise of ego, the performative dance of need, and reveals what is real. It is where the feminine teaches without speaking, and the masculine learns without being told. And so, the stillness continues. She does not rush to fill it. She does not chase closure. She lets the silence breathe, because she understands now that truth does not need to be explained, it simply is. The woman who once sought validation through words now finds peace in the spaces between them. And in those spaces, she begins to hear the ancient rhythm of her own becoming. There comes a moment when the silence is no longer a pause, it becomes a passage. The woman who once trembled in the stillness now walks through it as through a cathedral. Every echo of her own breath feels sacred, every heartbeat a prayer to something larger than her pain. She has learned that silence is not the absence of love but its refinement. Purified of illusion and demand, what once was reactive has become radiant. What once sought approval now emanates understanding. At this stage, she no longer waits for closure. Having learned that waiting is another form of attachment, the silence has taught her that some endings are not punishments but permissions. Permissions to grow beyond what could no longer contain her. She realizes that no apology, no explanation, and no reconciliation could ever give her what she sought, her own wholeness. The silence has given her that instead. The man, still caught in the web of confusion, feels a haunting pull toward what he cannot name. Her silence now feels like a mirror that reflects not his power, but his lack of it. He begins to sense that his pursuit has never been about her, it has been about escaping himself. He wanted her words to soothe the disquiet in his soul, to assure him of his worth, to reflect the strength he could not yet find within. Now, with her gone into the temple of her own solitude, he stands naked before the truth he has long avoided. Jung described this confrontation as the meeting between the ego and the self, the moment the false identity collapses under the weight of truth. For many men, this is the first taste of actual vulnerability. The silence of the woman becomes his initiation into his own depths. It whispers to him, "There is no saving her until you face yourself." But few hear that whisper clearly. Most mistake it for loss. And yet, for the rare few who do listen, the silence transforms. It becomes a call to the inner feminine, to the anima within, the part of his soul that has always longed for tenderness, intuition, and emotional wisdom. He begins to understand that her withdrawal is not an attack but an offering. She offers him the space to awaken, to stop projecting his need for control onto her presence. If he can face this lesson, he can grow. If not, he will repeat the same dance with another woman, chasing what he refuses to embody. Meanwhile, she continues her inward journey. Her silence deepens into discernment. She begins to see with clarity the difference between connection and entanglement, between love and dependency. She recognizes how often she mistook pain for passion, intensity for intimacy. She sees now that real love cannot exist where one soul must shrink for the other to feel safe. This understanding does not make her bitter, it makes her luminous. She begins to glow with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer seeks permission to exist. The world, sensing her shift, responds differently. Men who once approached her from a place of ego now find themselves unsettled by her calm. She no longer plays the role of mirror to their unhealed wounds. She does not react to their attempts to provoke, to possess, or to impress. Her silence disarms, because it cannot be controlled. But make no mistake, this silence is not cold. It is warm, steady, and vast like a night sky. Within it lives compassion, just not the self-sacrificing kind. It is the compassion of understanding. She knows that everyone is walking their own path of awakening. Even though still lost in the ego's labyrinth, her heart remains open, but her boundaries are sacred now. She gives, but not from emptiness. She listens, but not to be consumed. And this is the most confusing thing of all for a man. Because he can no longer place her. He cannot categorize her as soft or hard, submissive or strong, emotional or detached. She is all of these and none of them. She has become the embodiment of paradox, the union of opposites that Jung called the conjunctio, the sacred marriage of the masculine and feminine within the self. She no longer seeks balance from without because she has found it within. In her presence, a man must either rise or retreat. He must choose between the comfort of his ego and the challenge of his own evolution, because a woman who has embraced her silence radiates an energy that demands authenticity. It calls forth the king from the boy, the consciousness from the chaos. And for those who cannot meet her there, she remains silent, not out of dismissal, but out of wisdom. She knows that not every soul is ready to hear the music that silence plays. This transformation ripples outward. The woman begins to notice that her relationships shift, not because she forces them to, but because her energy no longer aligns with pretense. The conversations she engages in are deeper, slower, and richer in meaning. She no longer fears solitude because she has befriended it. Her aloneness has become her altar, not her exile. And when she finally speaks again, her words carry weight. They no longer come from a need to be understood, but from the fullness of self-awareness. Each word is deliberate, each gesture infused with intention. The man who hears her now realizes that her silence was not the end of connection, but the birth of truth. This stage is elegant, a quiet majesty that cannot be faked. She does not rush to prove her worth, she embodies it. Her boundaries are her beauty. Her calm is her power. She no longer measures love by its intensity but by its integrity. She sees that real intimacy is not found in constant noise, but in shared stillness, in two souls standing whole, side by side, without needing to consume or rescue each other. And this realization changes everything. Because the woman who has mastered silence no longer fears loss. She knows that what is meant for her will meet her on her level of peace, not her level of pain. She no longer tries to convince anyone to stay. She holds space, and those capable of depth will remain because they feel seen, not through her effort, but through her essence. Her silence, once mistaken for withdrawal, becomes her language of power. It says, without words, I am no longer explaining myself to be understood. I am simply existing to be felt. The man, if he is ready, begins to understand that what confused him was never her silence, it was his inability to hear it. Because to hear silence, one must be still within. And so, for the first time, he sits quietly too, not to chase, not to strategize, but to feel, to listen. And in that moment, something ancient stirs within him, the same energy that awakened her consciousness. Her silence, then, becomes not a wall but a bridge, a sacred path where two awakened souls might one day meet again. Not in need, but in truth. And that is the secret the silence was always trying to teach. The woman who falls silent does not disappear, she transforms. She does not reject, she reclaims. She does not abandon, she returns to herself. There is a stillness that comes after the storm, a stillness that is not absence, but arrival. It is the moment when the woman who once burned with questions finally stops asking. Not because she no longer cares, but because she now knows that the answers were never outside of her. Silence has become her sacred teacher, and solitude her initiation into wholeness. This is the point of return, the final threshold of transformation. She no longer resists what was lost, nor clings to what once gave her meaning. The emotional tides that once tossed her between longing and resentment have quieted. There is no more prolonged war within her, there is only space, vast, luminous, alive. In Jung's language, this is individuation fulfilled, the harmonious integration of shadow and light, the conscious and the unconscious, the masculine and the feminine. The woman who emerges here is no longer divided between who she was taught to be and who she truly is. She has descended into her depths, faced her shadows, and risen, radiant, from their embrace. Her silence is no longer a defense, it is devotion. Not to another, but to truth. It is the sound of self-possession, of spiritual authority reclaimed. Her calm presence now moves through the world like water, soft, yet unyielding. She does not react, she responds. She does not chase, she magnetizes. The man who once feared her silence now stands at a crossroads. He can remain in the comfort of his unexamined patterns, or he can step forward, into awareness. The energy she now carries invites only one kind of partnership, one that honors truth over control, depth over dominance, presence over performance. For those who cannot meet her here, her silence will remain an enigma, a riddle they cannot solve. But for those who have begun their own descent into the soul, her silence will feel like recognition because silence recognizes silence. Depth calls to depth. And so, a new rhythm begins. The woman who has found her center no longer participates in the emotional economies of scarcity. She no longer bargains for love or sacrifices herself for the sake of belonging. She has learned that to abandon oneself for the sake of connection is the loneliest path of all. Now, when she loves, it is from abundance. When she speaks, her words are clear and concise. When she walks away, it is from peace, not pain. She does not punish through silence, she honors through distance. Her energy is clean, untainted by resentment, unbound by expectation. In this state, she becomes magnetic not because she tries to be, but because she is. She embodies what the Stoics called ataraxia, inner tranquility untouched by external chaos. Seneca would say she has mastered the art of detachment, not as indifference, but as freedom. She has learned to hold love without clutching it, to release without bitterness, to stand alone without fear. And it is here, in this divine neutrality, that the world begins to shift around her. The same silence that once confused men now awakens them. Her presence whispers to the masculine, come whole, or do not come at all. It does not demand perfection, it invites integration. It says, do your work, face your shadow, heal your heart, then meet me, not as half, but as whole. This is the sacred balance Jung envisioned, the reunion of masculine and feminine within consciousness itself. It is not romance as possession, but love as a partnership between equals. A woman who has integrated her silence no longer seeks to complete a man, she aims to witness him. She no longer needs him to lead, she invites him to rise beside her. In her presence, authenticity becomes the only currency. Pretenses fall away, Games dissolve. The old stories of dominance and submission crumble, replaced by something ancient yet newly born, mutual reverence. And should she find no one to meet her there, she is untroubled, for she has already met herself. Her peace no longer depends on companionship, it is companionship. She walks through life not searching, but radiating. The world feels her energy before she even speaks. Her silence, once misunderstood as withdrawal, has become her language of truth, her aura of self-knowledge. The men who once mistook her calm for disinterest now see it for what it is, mastery. They realize, perhaps too late, that she was never rejecting them, she was choosing herself. And that choice was her liberation. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." That is what her silence has done. It has taken her through terror and tenderness, through grief and grace, until she stood face to face with the one she'd been waiting for all along, her own soul. And in that meeting, everything changed. The noise of the world, once deafening, now hums in harmony with her inner rhythm. The fear of being misunderstood has dissolved, for she no longer needs to explain her truth to be at peace with it. She moves differently now, not to prove, but to express, not to please, but to embody. The power of her silence has come full circle. It is no longer the stillness of withdrawal, but the symphony of alignment. The woman who once fell silent to protect herself now remains silent because she is protected by awareness, by discernment, by the sacred knowing of her own worth. And that, perhaps, is the ultimate revelation, that silence was never the absence of voice, but the presence of wisdom. It was the soul's way of saying, you do not need to shout to be heard, you only need to know who you are. So when she walks now, she does so with unhurried grace. When she loves, she does so without fear. When she chooses, she does so from a position of power. Because the woman who understands her silence has mastered the art of being utterly, unapologetically, whole. And the man who can stand before such a woman without shrinking has mastered the art of presence. Together, they do not complete each other, they complement each other. And in that rare equilibrium, love ceases to be a battlefield, it becomes a sanctuary. There comes a season after transformation that few speak about, the quiet dawn after rebirth. The woman who has reclaimed her silence steps into this new light not with triumph, but with serenity. She does not shout her healing from rooftops, she embodies it in every glance, every choice, every act of restraint. She moves as if the universe has aligned beneath her feet, as if every step is blessed with invisible grace. She has discovered a truth that few ever reach. Real power is not in being understood, it is in being aligned. The world can misread her calm as mystery, her discernment as distance, her peace as pride, yet she no longer corrects those perceptions. She knows that the need to be seen by others fades once one has learned to see oneself clearly. Her silence has become sacred ground. It is where her intuition speaks in symbols, where her creativity awakens, where the divine feminine, the Sophia, the ancient wisdom within, whispers through her. She begins to realize that silence is not only for healing the past, but also for creating the future. Every dream she once suppressed begins to take shape. Every seed she once planted in tears now blooms quietly beneath the moonlight of her new awareness. There is a rhythm to this kind of peace, slow, deliberate, grounded. It does not chase outcomes, it attracts alignment. She no longer fears missing out because she has learned that what is hers will never require her to abandon herself. The universe meets her at the frequency of her integrity. And this truth radiates from her presence. Those around her begin to feel it, friends, lovers, even strangers. People are drawn to her energy. Although they cannot quite put their finger on what it is. It is not charm, not beauty, not charisma. It is coherence, the rare harmony between inner truth and outer expression. Her energy says, without words, I am safe within myself. For men who cross her path, this is both an invitation and a challenge. The old games no longer work. The tactics of charm, control, or indifference dissolve in her calm. Her silence disarms pretension. Her gaze, unhurried and unwavering, becomes a mirror in which they must face themselves. And only those who have faced their own shadows can stand in that mirror without flinching. Yet she does not seek to test or expose anyone. Her silence has softened into grace. She understands that every soul moves at its own pace. Every man must meet his own shadow in his own time. She no longer takes it personally when others project their fears onto her calm. Projection is what the unconscious does when it cannot bear its own reflection. She knows that now. Jung once said that, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed, and that is what her silence has done. It has become alchemical. It transforms everything it touches. The man who dares to stay in her presence begins to feel the invitation to evolve. Her stillness does not demand change, it evokes it. It calls the masculine to rise, not to dominate, but to awaken. This is the new dance between the healed feminine and the conscious masculine. It is no longer built on need, but on mutual respect, no longer driven by fear of loss, but by reverence for truth. Each honors the other's sovereignty, knowing that love without freedom is not love. It is bondage disguised as romance. In this new world she inhabits, her silence is no longer a response, it is a creative act. It is the fertile soil from which ideas, art, and purpose grow. She writes, paints, builds, teaches, and leads, not from wound, but from wisdom. Her work carries the vibration of the silence that gave birth to it, deep, healing, and magnetic. She becomes a living archetype of the self-realized feminine, the lover who knows her worth, the queen who rules without control, the sage who guides without words. And perhaps, in some quiet hour of reflection, she looks back, not with regret, but with compassion, for the version of herself who once begged to be heard. That woman was not weak, she was learning. Every plea, every tear, every moment of confusion was part of the alchemy. It was how the soul carved space for its own expansion. She does not shame that past self, she honors her for surviving. Now, when storms come, she no longer resists them. She stands within them, steady and soft. Her silence is her anchor, her breath her compass. Even pain, when it returns, does not drown her, it teaches her. She knows that everything transient serves what is eternal. The loss of illusion is the price of authenticity, and she pays it gladly. In the quiet of her nights, she speaks to the universe in the language of gratitude, not for what she has gained, but for what she has released, for the space that silence has given her, for the clarity to love without losing herself, for the courage to remain kind without becoming naive. She now understands that her silence was never about the man, the world, or the past. It was about her evolution. It was the voice of her higher self saying, enough, enough of over-explaining, enough of seeking validation, enough of mistaking noise for connection. The silence stripped her down to her essence so that she could rebuild not from fear, but from truth. And now, that truth speaks, not in volume, but in vibration. Her life itself becomes the statement, her peace, the protest, her presence is the proof. The world, still loud with distraction, might never fully understand her, but she no longer needs it to. She has transcended the need for external mirrors. She has become her own reflection, clear, luminous, complete. When others ask what changed her, she smiles gently. How could she explain that it wasn't something that happened to her, but something that awakened within her? That silence was not a retreat, but a resurrection? That the woman she has become is not new, but ancient, reborn from the ashes of her own forgetting? There is a saying whispered through the ages, when a woman remembers who she is, the world remembers what it means to be whole. Her silence has done that remembering. And so she walks forward, into her life, not as someone healed, but as someone whole. Every step she takes becomes a blessing to the earth beneath her feet. Every breath a song of quiet power. The men who meet her now do not confuse her calm with coldness. They recognize the depth it conceals. They know that her silence is not empty, it is full of galaxies. And when she finally speaks again, the world listens. Because when a silent woman finally chooses to speak, she does not tell from the wound, she speaks from the throne. And her voice, once quiet, now carries the weight of eternity. The woman who understands her silence does not chase. She chooses. And in that choice, she becomes the embodiment of peace itself.